Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Learn Smart Coding. This is Karthik, thanks for joining with me today. In this video, we're going to cover the Angular complete course. This is for the beginners as well as for the intermediates. So come let's take a look. Alright, so these are the topics that we will be covering in this course. So we will start with the dev local setup, which will be really quick, and then the project setup, then we'll go through the components, the data bindings, the various data binding, pipes, directives. So pipes and directives in between in the course I'll cover. And then we'll also see services, dependency injections, routing techniques, auth guards, and then the reactive forms. We will build all the code operations, and there are many more in this. So let's take a look at the demo app and then we'll go from there. So this is the demo app that you're seeing. So I've already developed, hosted in the Azure. You can see this is the URL, and this is basically I've mimicked Amazon to a very minimum level, like I would say less than 1%. Okay, so basically this app shows all the products that I'm trying to sell, and I can add actually some product to my wish list as a customer, and you can see the green color. It's been added in real time. And if I go to my wish list, I can show these two the wish list items here. And if I come back to home, if you browse down, you can also see your wish list here as a customer. Okay, so these are the products, and then by clicking a particular product item, we can go to the products, and you can also delete whatever you have already saved in the wish list. Okay, now if you click on the products, all the products are by default, it is displayed, and you can filter it on a real time. You can change the category, right? And you can do many things here. You can change the category. So this is how you filter. More than one filter is applied, and all these things can happen. And instantly whatever you're adding, it will show in the my list. You see this one item, and if I go to the manage product, I'm allowing for now 2 products to be edited. You can actually create your own product, unlimited products, and you can edit it. And let's say I'm creating a product. Okay, so this is exactly developed with the reactive forms, a much more detail of how you will handle the errors in the front end as well as how you will handle the errors in the back end. So if the back end is throwing 400, I will also handle that here. And here you see these validations, right, will actually show you instantly and stop you doing unnecessary transaction. So for this product, there's at least a minimum of $5. So you can have to provide the name, description, some price here, choose a particular category, and then the available since is the date from when the product is available. You can save. You can see the product has been saved. If I go to the manage product, by default the product has no images, right? So that's why this is there. And then you can edit this product. You can go and choose the images that you wanted to upload. So for now, I'm just going to upload some photos for this product. This is basically toy. You see this, instantly it will upload. The more you choose, it uploads and it comes here. Okay, so we'll see how these things are happening using input and output attributes, and we'll see how we will handle the errors. Alright, you see this, the manage product now started showing up the images. You can see this, and it will also be there in the products and the home page. And if I go to the products, it will be there. So let's say we are editing another product, all these images are there. Okay, so you can edit, and I will be giving you some task in between in this course. Please take that as a challenge and do it by yourself, and any such code comes for the pull request, I'll approve it and I'll give your credit, so because you have developed it. All right. So the next thing that we will see is the software setup. There are a few minimum basic softwares that you need for this. So I'm using the Visual Studio Code. You can download it from code.visualstudio.com. And if you're using Mac OS or Windows OS, Linux OS, based on that, right? So you download those softwares accordingly, and then go to this node.js.org and then download the latest one. So this is the latest stable version, right? Recommended version. Do not download the current version. It has some breaking changes. So download that. So we have 2 things. Now I'm going to open up my command prompt and install the npm Angular Cli. So for that, use this command npm install -t is for global. So it will install the Angular Cli at the global level. So once you install it, if you see ng space dash dash version, it will show you the version of Angular that you have in on your machine. So I have Angular 13 CLI installed, node version, all these things. Good. So we have the minimum software requirement has been set up, and what we are going to do is we're going to create a new app using ngnew space followed by the application name. So in my case, I'm creating a new app called LSC Essential Products. Okay, so ng space new space the name of the product. So now this, what it will do is it will ask you a couple of questions that you need to have a routing, and I'm gonna say no because I will teach you how to add the routing by default, not the template which is creating, right? And then you can choose whichever CSS version that you're using. I'm going to choose the basic CSS. So once you choose these configuration, it's going to install the packages, and then we'll show you all the packages how it is installing. So I've installed it for now, so I'm going to open up this in the Visual Studio Code. So for that, I'll change this directory and then say code space dot. So once you say code space dot, this folder, right, whatever was installed, this application itself is open in the Visual Studio Code. Now if you take a look, this is the app that we have. These coding that you already have it, right, it's a default template which is created by the Angular, and you can see in the index page it has some basic HTML, and then there's only one component called app root component. Okay, so we'll go through what are those what is the present in the body and all. The important thing that you need to know for now is under the angular.json, right, and then the package.json. So under the package.json, whatever is under the scripts, they're all predefined scripts. So you can actually use npm run and then followed by the name of the script, and it will just execute whatever is there within the script. Dependency is all the packages that is there for this project. These are the dependencies like Angular animations, code, blah blah, etc. So all those are default thing. Dev dependency is anything that is required for the development purpose, for the local development purpose. Okay, now let's go to the angular.json. Here, if you look at under the architect build options, there are two things that you need to notice: the styles and the script. So the styles, right, any styles that you wanted to be in a global, like across all the components, you put it there and you can use it in this location. If you want to add more styles or any styles that is coming from the packages, you can add it there. Okay, it's going to bundle up when you build the project. And script, basically you can add all the scripts there. Now coming to the first ngModel. Okay, this is one bare minimum ngModel which is required and which is created by our template. Under the declaration sections, all the components will go. Under the import sections, all the other modules. So like the browser modules, common modules, any modules that you create or inbuilt from the Angular, you have to import it here. Okay, don't worry about all these things. We'll go through and tell you what is module, what it comprises of, and all those things. Okay, bootstrap. Now this is the place where we say what is the starting point and what is the first component that needs to be loaded, and in our case it's app component. You see this app component has 4 files: CSS, HTML, and the spec.tss and the component.tss. Okay, so these are the bare minimum thing. Okay, now let's run this application and see how it looks. So for that, use this command ngserve. Open up the terminal by going to terminal and then new terminal, and this by default it opens up in the port 4200. Okay, and you see this, all the CSS which was present in that, the template created, right? So with that we got this beautiful page. Okay, and it shows you all the documentations, all those things, etc, etc. But we're going to scrap all these things. We're going to build each component by ourselves, one by one, step by step. Okay, all right. So before we proceed, right, let's install something which is required. So go to this Visual Studio Code and then go to the extension. Okay, please install this Angular Snippet version 13. Okay, this is from the John Papa. So what this does is, right, it will make your life easy. Basically, it's gonna give you a shortcut to create component, module, services, so many things, right? There are inbuilt snippets, and you will see in this video how I'm using those things. So long story short, let's install this extension. okay, Angular Snippet, and then to beautify your the code, which is to format the code, I'm using prettier code format. Okay, so I have these two installed on my machine, so you also install it, and you will see the importance of these two throughout the course. So you'll see the importance of these two in our courses, and you'll really feel very easy to use this. So next what we're going to see is the creating components and data binding. So if you see, my project has a readme file, and I've actually added step by step of what we did, right? So we created the project, we ran some commands, and all those things we saw, right? So in this part we're going to cover creation of a component and what is component, and then the data bindings. Okay, so open up the new terminal. Okay, you can go to the terminal and open up the new terminal, or you can click on the plus, and then I'm going to use some inbuilt commands. This is the CLI commands from Angular. So basically, if you say ng generate component followed by the component name, okay, it is going to generate the component for us. So you can also use the shortcut ng G for generate, C for component, and then followed by the component name. So I've created a component called home component, and you can see 4 files created and 1 file got updated. Okay, so this home component has 4 files. One is the CSS file, one is the HTML file, one is the test file, and one is the component file. So this is the component file. So these 4 files got created, right? So what is the other thing that got updated? So if you go to the app.model.ts, the component, right, the home component was automatically added under the declaration. If you remember, I was telling that all the components will be under the declaration section, and this is the component that we created and got added. Now let's take a look at the component itself. So component, a class becomes a component when you decorate with the component decorator, and then it has couple of things like selector, template URL, styles URL. Selector is the one that you will use how to bring up the component in another component, and the template and the template URL, there are two things. So if you just have a piece of code where you don't need to have a separate file for HTML, you can actually use something called template. And the one that I'm using is a backtick. It's not single quotes, it's a backtick. Okay, so backtick will allow us to write multiples of lines without any issues. That's why the backtick is. So if I add like this, right, h1 tag, this is h1 tag, and you can basically you don't need to have this separate HTML file itself. And let's go to this component.html, and I'm going to clear everything. So how do you use that home component now? Like I said, there is something called selector. See, app-home is the selector of the app component. So if I put this and the application is running, right, you see this, all this superb, the initial screen went off, and the piece of code that we added started coming in. So let's go to the component again, and this is something, it's in the template, right? So if I put the template URL back, you can actually write the piece of code inside this HTML, and because it's already added, you can see the piece of code which was sitting in the HTML file started coming up, which is home works. Okay, so that's how. So the component is basically a collection of HTML, CSS, and some logic, JavaScript logic. Okay, so that's the component, and you can use this component so many times, several times, in different places. So now let's take a look at the data binding. So data binding, we have a couple of things like interpolation, one-way binding, event binding, and two-way binding. You can see in the picture, the left side is the DOM is basically our HTML, okay, the document object model, and then the right side is the component. So how this component and this DOM is interacting with respect to the data bindings, that is what we're going to see. We're going to cover one by one topic, and let's take a look. Okay, so the first thing that I will do was create a variable. So you can create a variable in the top, and I'm going to create a variable called title. Okay, so I'm also going to teach you some basic TypeScript as you progress in this course. So if I say a variable name and then equal to some character within that quotes, then the variable automatically type inferred, and if you hover it, it will tell you it is a string. Okay, so this is called type inference in the TypeScript. Anything that you write in the right side will automatically be recognized in the left side. Okay, so in this case, this is a string type. Title is a string type. Okay, you can also say title colon string, and you're explicitly saying this is a string. So in this case, we are going to add a variable called description, and we explicitly say it's a string. Okay, now if you write like this, right, based on the TS config that you have, it will give you some warnings. So basically this means it's not initialized, it's going to be a null when it runs. That's what the compiler is complaining. So in order to avoid that, we are putting an exclamatory mark that will tell the compiler that do not care about this, we will assign this value on the runtime anywhere in the next step of code. So that is what we say. Okay, so ng on init. See, ng on init, if you see after the implements on init, right, on line number 8, this is one of the lifecycle hooks. I'll cover lifecycle hook. So basically lifecycle hook is a lifecycle of a page of a component. So this is lifecycle of a component. This is the second lifecycle hook that triggers when a component is initiated. Okay, which means all your basic loading stuff, you will put it inside this ng on init. Okay, whether calling a service or doing something which is required for your component in the initial state, right? So those things you will put it here. Okay, if you're coming from the .NET background or any other programming background in a web application perspective, you'll always have a page lifecycle, right? It has a series of events that will trigger one by one. That's exactly the lifecycle hooks in component as well. Okay, now let's go to these the HTML, and in order to do the interpolation, right, double curly brace, you see the double curly brace, anything that you put inside the double curly brace, okay, that will be evaluated by the Angular. In our case, title is a variable which can be evaluated. Okay, that's why I'm putting it inside this curly brace. If you put anything which is not there declared in the component, it will start giving you error. So let's see how it looks. So the first one, title, that's why home page is coming, and if I give the description inside this curly brace, okay, and whatever I put it in the description is going to come here. See, this is called interpolation, and also this is called one-way binding. Okay, anything that you put inside double curly brace is called interpolation. Okay, this code, this content is added automatically inside this paragraph tag. Okay, so this is called interpolations. Just remember this. Okay, there is something called one-way binding. Okay, so we're going to see the examples of the data binding. So in Angular 2 and above, right, the beauty of Angular is you can actually bind the variables or anything to any of the attribute that is available inside a HTML tag. You take any HTML tag and then anything that it has an attribute. When I say attribute, name is an attribute, ID is an attribute. Okay, there are many attributes for each given element, right? So you can actually bind those things. So if you see, the interpolation works with double curly brace, right? If you put anything inside the double curly brace, it's gonna give you the content of that inside this. Okay, all right. So if I start using this double curly brace, you will see this error. So don't use that without having any variables defined. So it will not be able to evaluate. That is what I was trying to show you, that you just cannot use double curly brace in Angular directly in the HTML. Okay, so we are going to give a title. We are using the interpolation, and then we'll also use the description here quickly. Okay, so we got some data there. Okay, the UI is looking now. Okay, so like I said, right, so if you have to use the data binding, one-way data binding, you can use any attribute. So in this case, I'm using an inner HTML attribute and defining the description inside that HTML, that attribute. Okay, so if you see line number 6, I'm giving the description directly onto the tag, and in this case you can see still the output is same. That's because I'm using a square bracket. When you use a square bracket and then you put an attribute of a given element, okay, to the left side, and then the right side will become a variable which is defined in the component. So when this statement is executed, the description is evaluated and assigned into this inner HTML. Okay, so if you use double bracket, if you use the square bracket for a given attribute, and right side if you assign a variable, it will evaluate. Okay, this is one way. And there is something called title attribute, right? So if you put title and then put a description, okay, so basically the title attribute will get a value. So how do we know this? If you hover on this second one, you see this, when I hover, the title is coming, but for the first one it won't come. Okay, that's because we are assigning the description to the title variable. What is the other way of doing it? If you don't put the square bracket and if you just put title, you need to put the double curly brace to the right side. Okay, only then it will evaluate. See, that's the difference. If you start using the square bracket, that's called one-way data binding, and you need to just put the variable. If you use the interpolation, you don't need to put the square bracket to the left. So this is where the developer get confused. So don't get into that issues. It's okay. Initially when you do, you might get this problem, but eventually you'll understand how to use this. Okay, so I've given all this description here, when and what to use, so don't worry about these things. So it will stay there. This is all for understanding. Okay, so the next thing is the two-way binding. Okay, so for the two-way binding, which means you can actually change the data from component to this view and view to the component. Okay, that's called two-way binding. So I've added a basic input. Okay, the input of type text, just the text box, and I'm going to show you how it looks. Okay, so before that we have to come to this this app module, and then we need to import a common module. Okay, and then the form module. There are two modules that you need to import, the common module and the form module. Form module is required for our two-way bindings. Okay, so I've removed the browser module and imported the other two module. That's because browser module is already included in the common module. Okay, so how do you use this two-way binding? So two-way binding, if you have to use, you need to use something called ball inside a football court, I can say. So square bracket, and then inside that a parenthesis. Okay, so and inside the parenthesis you just need to use ngModel, and then followed by, to the right side, a variable. So you know already there is a variable called title, and I'm trying to assign the title variable to this one. Okay, so we got some errors, so I think we need to include the browser module as well. So this is how we learn, right? So there are some errors showing up, and you can figure out what is missing. So that's why I was removing and adding it back for a given demo. Okay, so now this error went. So what happens? The home page, which is assigned to a title variable, automatically started coming up in this text box. Okay, that is possible only because it's a two-way binding and it's using an ngModel. As you type here, you can see the data is changing in the top. Okay, so initially the variable had some value, which is one-way binding. Okay, and when we are using that for the two-way binding using the ngModel, this variable is affected everywhere in the component. Title variable is mapped here, so as you type here, it will start affecting the title variable. Now I have added to the description, so whatever is there in the description started appearing in this text box. And if you start editing this, right, like if you start adding it, deleting it, you see this instantly it is updating to the other places also. The two paragraphs that we have, it is affecting there as well. See, that's the beauty of this two-way binding. Okay, this is very useful because as when the user types in, you can actually do some action, you can actually communicate this content directly to the component. That's where the two-way binding is very useful. Okay, you will see these things in action when we develop many pages or many features of the shopping app. Okay, so these are things that you're learning now. It's the basics that you need to know before we get started into a real development. Okay, so that's why we are looking at the data binding. And now next is the event binding. Event binding is basically an event, right? An action triggered by a user on the front end. It could be a click, double click, right click. It could be any action a user is triggering. Okay, and then you need to perform a set of things based on the action that was triggered. So that's called event binding. So I have a button. Okay, I have a button called click me. Okay, so when someone is clicking this button, I wanted to perform some action, so that's called event binding. So how do we do that? Now, like I said, there are many attributes for a given HTML, right? Similarly, if you take a button HTML, go to this W3 schools and see, there will be many events: click, double click, blur, so many events, right? So you need to use those events which is inbuilt for those HTML, and you can bind it. So in our case, we will use a parenthesis, and inside the parenthesis you will use the click event, and right side will be your function. Okay, so I have a function called button clicked. I'm binding this button clicked to that click event. So when someone clicks that, this code will be executed. So I'm going to click this, and you can see this function was invoked and alert message was triggered. Okay, this is just to understand. So if I use double click, okay, when you double click on this click me, I'm expecting this method, this function to be triggered. But will this work? If I click, it didn't work, right? Why? Because double click, there is no such event. Okay, so dbl click is the double click. You can go to this this double3schools.com and see what are the available events for a given button, or any element. So blur is like when mouse move out of this control, and you can use this error, focus me, focus out, mouse move, mouse out. You can try this. You can put any event there, and based on the event it will fire this. Okay, all right. Okay, so let's take a look at something on this event. So I'm going to change it back to the click, so click will trigger this. Okay, so now you can also send some parameters from this click event. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a string inside this button click. Okay, in our case the title is itself is a string, so I'm going to change this method which accepts one string. Okay, so I'm putting a parameter data colon, and I'm defining a type that is a string, and directly alerting the data that is coming to this button. Okay, so in our case it was a title. I was sending title, right? If you see my HTML, I'm actually sending title. You see this button clicked inside this title, and if you just send something else, it's gonna send this description itself. So let's click and see. You see this, welcome to homepage of Angular Learning. So that's the description. Okay, so like if I type something, the description holds this value, this whole set of value. So if I click on this click me now, it's gonna send this whole description. See, all these things are happening instantly. The evaluation is happening instantly. Okay, so this interpolation one-way binding, and then this this it's event binding. So if you put anything inside this colon, this will not be evaluated. Okay, this itself is considered as a string. So in our case, description itself is a string which is quoted inside a single quote or a double quote. That's why you saw that in the alert. Okay, what else we can do? So let's take a look at this input. So in input, how do you add an event? We saw only two-way binding, right? So I'm adding an event called blur. Blur is what? When you move out of this the control focus, then the blur event will trigger. Okay, so on blur event, what I'm doing is I'm triggering this button clicked and sending the description. Okay, so that is what I'm trying to do. So let's see whether this works or not. Okay, so I'm putting some title here. So title is getting changed. It's a description basically, but you see this when I'm typing it, when I go out of this control, the button is clicked. Why? Because blur event of this input is triggered. So we have ngModel, we have event binding, we have two-way binding, all these things together. Okay, so we saw all these things, right? Two-way binding, event binding, one-way binding, interpolation. We know how it works with the component. Great. So before we start developing the pages, right, I would like to show you what CSS I'm using it, because many of you have asked me how to develop responsive framework UI, right? So in this course, right, I'm not going to use any extra CSS. I'm going to use everything which is free, available, readily available outside. because this is just the demo app, and then the focus is to learn the Angular, not the CSS. But I'll still guide you what I have done, and I'll also have a separate video, short video, which tells you how to build an application by yourself. Even if you don't know how to build a responsive framework, I'll give you some tips from where you can get the templates and you can use it. Okay, so I'll give you some tips from where to get the templates, free templates, or you can purchase the template, and how to use that. Okay, so let's focus on the current one. Okay, so how do you use this template? Okay, so go to google.com and type bootstrap. You will end up coming to this getbootstrap.com, and getbootstrap.com is from the official tutor based one. So the latest version is the version 5, and if you go to this example, right, all this example will definitely show you different sidebars, features, heroes, headers, and so many things, checkout page, pricing page. All these things are sample template. Okay, so how did I use my template? You see this template, this one. How did I use this? So I come here, I open up this headers, which will open up like this, and basically I've used this one, the one that I'm highlighting. Okay, and then I've done some changes. So if you go and click on Control U, you will end up showing up this page, and here for different headers you have different piece of code here. You can pick whichever header you want. I picked whichever header I want, and then just modified my images alone. That's how I got this header. Okay, so if you're wondering how I got this header for this product, this is what. So how do I get these things, all these beautiful things, right? Again, same, I'm going to give you at a high level. If you go to this website and come to this components, you see this, all the components. So if I go to this card, there's something called card. Okay, you see this card, and you can use the image here, and this card is what you're seeing here. Okay, so that is how I use in my the sample project. I'm not using anything. Sometimes it is not really responsive because the images are not aligned to what it is. So don't worry about these things. Let's focus only on the Angular now. I'm just guiding you how I use the CSS. Okay, so let's get into this coding. So this is how I use. So now let's get into this development of the page. So next is we're going to create the header component. Okay, so I'm going to use the ng generate component, and then I'm going to create the header component. You see this header component has been created. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the snippet that I'm going to use the snippet that I showed you how to get it from the Bootstrap website, right? So that header section, I'm going to use that piece of code. Okay, I'm going to use that piece of code and do some slight modification for the header, like the names and other things, and then that is what I'm going to use it in this header component HTML. Okay, so I've copy pasted a piece of code. Okay, and this is coming from this section, like I showed you how to get it. So this is the place where I got this content. See, it is really easy. Once you know from where to get it, how to decorate your piece of code, it will be really easy. See, if I copy paste and show you from where I'm getting, this is the header section. I got it. Okay, so that's coming from this Bootstrap example headers. Okay, so this has been copy pasted. Okay, so let's go to this okay, so now the header component is ready. So what we have to do is we have to use this using its selector. So app dash header is the selector. Header R is missing, that's why there's an error. So let's put the R back. So the component has been placed. If I run this application, what will happen? The header section, which is a piece of code, right, that started appearing, and then next to it, down to the header, I'm seeing my home component, which is the data binding. Okay, all right, so now let's build the whole home component. So this is the home component that you're seeing, right? So we need to build this. Okay, so how do I use the piece of code which is inside the home component? I can come to this components of this get bootstrap, and under the cart, this piece of code, I'm using it for here. Okay, so similarly, anything that you see on my website, they're all taken from the bootstrap itself, the component itself, the spinner and all those things. Okay, so let me show you the piece of code that I copied, right? So if I copy that piece of code and I come to this home component HTML, and I'm gonna exactly prepare that piece of code. Okay, so the first thing is the header section, the h1 tag, so which says browse all the products. So let's put that tag. I'm putting an the horizontal tab, and you see the next piece of code, I literally copy pasted it. I literally copy pasted the code. So let's run this locally and see how it looks. So I'm running it. You see this, there was an image that is yet to come, and then the card title and some text, whatever I copy pasted. Is it matching to some close by? Yes. So let's see what to do. So I'm going to cut this code and paste. I'm going to cut this code and paste it inside the container class. See, container class, if you use, that's the CSS class that is inbuilt. You can actually squeeze your content into the middle. I would say to the left and right side there will be some space. You see this? There's a space between the left and the right, and then the content is coming in the center. That's why I'm using the container class. Okay, so now what I'm going to use is, instead of the default template, I'm going to use some channel image to show you how first I will perform the piece of code and make sure it looks good. Okay, so basically I'm going to use a different image now. So let's change the image. I'm going to use the channel image. Okay, you see this? Now you can see the card is having an image, a title and the description. Okay, so this is the one that we will use for our product. So now if I copy paste the same piece of code, the same content is coming, but it's coming in the vertical order. Now in the bootstrap you can use a class called row and then divide the column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the class row and put the column into 3 or 4 section. Okay, each section, the whole section is 12 columns, and you can actually split accordingly. So I can put 4 columns and 4 columns, which means the 12 has been divided into 3 sections. Okay, so now if I copy paste this piece of code that I'm highlighting twice, which is inside the row, you can nicely see the image is coming in the horizontal way. You see this? The third image will come, the fourth image will come automatically to the down. There's some space, so we can actually change this 4 to the 3. So there are 4 items that you can add it. Now you know how to format it, right? So before you do any page build up, you need to first build up the page with some basic HTML. Okay, then only you should start writing the code in the component. That will make your life easy. Okay, so now I have taught you how to bring up a piece of HTML that will look similar to how the product is looking. Okay, so here all this content, you see this category, title, images, they're all dynamically placed by pulling up some records. Okay, so that is what we're going to do next. So we are on the home component. Okay, so in this component, right, we will actually learn the inbuilt directives. Okay, so if you see this URL, right, this is the API that I'm using for the project. So if you come to this API, okay, there's a piece of code that is displaying here. Okay, this is the response model of a particular API. Okay, so under the product API, if you see, this is the model that the product content is coming, and product content is what you see in the home page each product. Okay, so what we are going to do is, let's create the model and mimic such data as a static data first. So first we'll prepare the static data, and then I'll show you how to use the services. So in order to create an interface, you will write a file with that name, so category, and then I will going to write an interface. So export interface category, so which means it's going to export this category interface. Okay, so now let's go to this category section. Okay, and then come here and see, this is the response of the category, and if you get all categories, that will be a list of the same categories. So my advice is create a model of the property. Names should exactly match with what your API response model is giving. That way it is easy to map. If you don't have the names correctly, you need to manually map in Angular. Okay, so let's avoid that. So I have created the category interface. I'm going to create the product interface. Okay, so product interface, what I will do, I'll come to the product. I will see what is the response. This is the response. Okay, so I have name, product, all this, and then product images. I'm going to exactly create the two interfaces. One is for the product, one is for the product image. So the concept is same. So I'm going to take this as a model and going to copy paste a piece of code that I've already written. Okay, so you can see the product has the properties exactly matching with what API is returning, and I also have a product image property. You can see this product image has ID, base 64 images, mine type, and other stuff, right? So those properties are exactly created and I've used it. So this model, right, that you're seeing here, it's exactly same as what API is responding. So what we have done, we have actually created the model. Okay, so the product model, the category model, we have created both the models. So what we are going to do next is we're going to take some data from that API manually and keep it in a static file. Okay, and then with that static file data, we will first build our component. Later I will tell you how to replace that and call the actual API using the HTTP service and show the data. Okay, so let's do one by one. So the static file, I'm going to create a folder called static data, and inside that I'm going to create two static files. One is for the category data and the other one is for the product. So the first one, I'm going to create export a constant category data. That's a constant variable called category data. So come to this API. Okay, I will give you the API link in the description. Come to this API and execute this all and take this complete array. Okay, this is the data, so I've kept it in this array. So we have the category data now. Okay, now what we have to do is, and so the category data is ready. So category data is actually mimicking the exact product, so we can cast it to our model. Okay, the next thing that we will do is the product data. So export constant product data, and then I'm gonna do the exactly same thing. Come to this API, go to this product all, and I'm gonna take only the 10 data. Okay, so I'm not gonna grab everything. So for the 10 product, I copied everything and I'm going to copy paste inside this static data. Okay, so this has been copy pasted, and so I formatted Control A, Control KF. Control A, Control KF will format the code. Okay, so this has been formatted. You can see this 10 information added here. Okay, so next what we are going to do is, and if you just hover on it, you can clearly see the product data constant, right? It is mimicking to the product model that we have, because that's what the API is giving a response, right? All right, so it has the ID, name, product description, price, availability, most of the things. So available since that is a string, but we have that as a datetime, so we'll see how to change that. So for now we know these two. So come to this product, come to this home component. So here what we have to do is we are going to use the inbuilt directives to show some data. Okay, so let's define a variable called products, because it will contain more than one product. Okay, so that is of array of product. Okay, so we will define products, which is an array of product. So we'll define a products variable, which is array of product, and then we will also define a variable called categories, which is also array of categories, right? And these category and the product is the model that we defined. See, this is an example. If you put exclamation mark, you need to you need to assign the value later, but if you directly say category colon category array and equal to a square bracket, which means you're initializing the categories variable directly as an array, okay, as an empty array. So that's the difference. I'm giving you different flavors so you understand how these works in TypeScript, and also you will see how you're getting errors, why you get errors, why sometimes you don't get errors. So these are the details, okay. So I'm also defining whatever I'm explaining, whatever I'm explaining, right? So they're all there in this class file itself. Alright, so I formatted the code. Alright, I formatted the code. Control A, Control K, Control F will format the code. Okay, so now as I said, right, so ngOnInit is one of the lifecycle hook. So we're going to assign some value in this lifecycle hook. So basically we're going to take the product data from the static file, the constant that we exported, you remember. So we're going to take that and then assign it to this products. See, right now it is giving you error because basically it says one of the property is not properly assignable, like it is not matching with the data type. So let's go to this product and then the available since data is there, right? So we'll define this as string. Why I'm defining this as string for now is the data that we copied is coming as string, okay. So in order to speed up this process, let's define this thing. When we go to service, we will change this to date itself, okay. So that's a temporary purpose, don't get confused. Once I do this, this error is gone, okay. Now I have assigned the products. I'm going to assign the categories as well. So you will have the categories and the product the static data assigned to these two variables, okay. So if you go to the HTML, and I'm going to show you some tips, okay. So how do you visualize the data instantly on the UI without doing anything? So the tip is, what you can do is you can actually use the interpolation and then a pipe symbol with the JSON to print the data into the UI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say pre is a tag, okay. Interpolation, I'm using it double braces, and I'm putting products space. If you put a pipe symbol and then followed by a JSON, basically we are saying this variable has been evaluated, right? Show that in the JSON format. That is what we are saying, okay. So what is the benefit of this? So the benefit of this is you will be able to see the data on the UI. You don't need to debug and all, right? You see this UI data, you can visualize the data in the variables, and with that use, right, you can actually further develop anything on your UI. So if I don't need to go and see what is the name of the property, because right now I'm seeing it, okay. So I'm just taking it the first one and displaying here. With this properties, I'm going to build the above said above showing the images, the cards, okay. So that's how we build one by one. I would suggest you to code along with me so that you will learn more and very easily, okay. So what we're going to do, let's go back to the code. So we'll have to put the name, description and all those things properly, okay. So let's open up the website and see how it looks. You see this, the title comes here, and then the category milk and dairy goes in the top, and there is an image, and these are the basics information that we have. And you can also notice after a set of characters, it is limited with a dot dot dot, okay. So we are going to do one by one. So let's write a method called get category name. So what this is doing is it will accept an category ID, okay, and then it will try to filter that category from our categories variable, and it is going to return only the category name, okay. Because the product, right, the product data that we copied has a category ID, it doesn't have category name. So we will pass that ID and then try to find it using this dot categories dot find. That's an inbuilt method which is coming from ECMAScript 6 ES6. So we'll use that method and we'll pass in this ID, and once we find it, we will send a name, and we are putting an or symbol because if we don't find that category ID, we will return an empty string. Okay, so this is fairly simple, right? A simple method which will accept an ID, returns a name. Okay, great. What else? We need another method. So let's write a method called get shorten title. See, the title is very big. Okay, so if you start displaying the whole title, the images will start looking big. It will expand it or it will overlay it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the name of the product, which is the title, and I'm trying to find only 50 characters. If the title has more than 50 characters, it will return the first 50 characters along with a dot dot dot, which means it has more things to read. So I'm using a backtick. Okay, so with the backtick, and there is something in TypeScript feature, you can use template returns. Template returns, I already have a separate video, you can actually watch that to understand, but this is fairly easy. You use a dollar symbol and then followed by the bracket, the curly bracket. Okay, so you can evaluate the variables here. So here if you see title dot substring of 0, 50, I'm taking the first 50 characters and then a dot dot dot. Okay, that is what I'm doing. Okay, so it is going to return a shortened title. Okay, so we're going to use all these things, right? So here comes something called inbuilt directives. Okay, so the directives are very useful, and I'm gonna show you one by one directives. So the first directive that we will use is ngFor. So the directives will always start with the asterisk, the star, and then ng is a small letter and for f is the capital letter. Okay, so this is basically kind of a looping within an array. That is what a for loop, right? So if you are coming from a different programming language, for loop is what this ngFor is. Okay, so what we are going to do is, let's say let item of products. So which means we're going to take each item from this product array and going to loop it. Okay, anything within this div element that will be repeated. Okay, because if it has 10 products, 10 times line number 5 until it ends with the ending of this div, the whole section will be repeated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this item dot name, and you see this automatically this div tag which has a 4 element, right? The 4 column, it started repeating. So now we started getting 10 products with all the titles, but we don't want this big title, right? It wanted to be always same. So we will call this method within the interpolation and pass in this item dot name. This will call the function and it will return the shortened title. You see this? Now it is all same, the width is same, everything looks good. Okay, so like this we're going to take each item of the product and going to bind it to the HTML. So I can actually bind the item dot name. So when you hover on it, it will show the complete name, but when it is displaying, it will display with a dot dot dot. You see this? It's going to display the complete name. See, very big, right? So that's the beauty. So you're using the interpolation, you're using the one-way binding. Okay, so whatever we learned in data binding, we are now using it here. Okay, so the event binding also we used, right? So we're calling the methods. So here category name, similarly we call the get category name function, pass in the category ID. So what this will do, this method will take the ID, try to find the the category name. Right now it is giving error because there is no category ID. That's a spelling mistake. C should be a small letter. Okay, so here you go. So once you put this, now the app loads. Now you can see the category also coming. You see this? Dairy and milk, food, men's care, all the toys, toddlers, all jams, all these things started coming. Great. So we have able to build up this. Now the next thing that we need to build up an image, right? So there is no image right now. The product is showing nice images, but in our template we haven't build up the image. So how do you build up the image? It's again same. You see this image has something called source, src. That's a attribute of a image HTML tag. Okay, so if you also see the product data that we got from the API, it has base64 encoded content, it has mine type and all those things. Okay, so there are two ways we can show images. One is directly the image itself by linking the image name. The other one is you can actually show the image which is in the base64 content by this way. So you just need to define the source with the data and the mine type, and then the browser will be able to show the image. So the first thing is we are saying the mine type, and then we are saying base64 comma followed by the base64 content that we are getting from the product image. Okay, great. So one thing you should understand, this product image has many product images. We are going to go through the first item, the indexing the 0 item, and take only the first item of the image and show it. Okay, and if you want to do further, you can use carousel to show many images on this page. Like you can actually show carousel and all. That take it as a task for you guys. You can actually try it out by yourself and let me know if it comes very nice. You can also raise a pull request in the GitHub. Alright, so now you see this. I'm taking the first image and started showing up. Very nice, right? So now we are exactly building what I have already built. Okay, so one by one we're building it. Okay, so that is how you use the attributes and bind it. So because you learned data binding, now you know how these things bindings are working. Okay, so we have a beautiful home page with all the products displayed here, the 10 products that we have here, right? So later we will use the services to pull up all the images, all the data, not from the static content. We will do that. So I'm going to show you some more examples. So I've come to the static data, and one of the product, I've removed the product images, which means this specific product doesn't have the product image. Now because of that, you see what happened? The UI is almost collapsed, and if you go to this console, you can see the error. So error is basically saying we are trying to do something with the product image and there is no such property defined. So you cannot read property of undefined mine type. Why? Because for that particular product there is no image. So how do we handle it? So if you come here, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to check whether the product image has some images. Only if it has images, show. If not, show some default image. So how do we do that with the directives? Okay, so we're going to take item.product images and use a directive called ngIf. See, ngIf, if you put this condition, okay, length greater than 0, which means it will evaluate and see if there is at least one, only then it will show that image. Now you see the UI is not broken. It started showing up all the rest of the images. Okay, it did not break, right? But the first one doesn't look good. So we can actually bring up a default image whenever we don't find an image. You don't need to specify dot length greater than 0. Dot length itself will give you evaluation of true or false, and if there is more than 0, only then it is called true. Okay, so now I'm going to copy paste another image and I'm going to use the ngIf, but an opposite of the if statement. So if it doesn't have any images, show this default image, and if it has some images, show all the images from the product data itself, right? So you have learned ngFor, ngIf directives. You know how the directives work. So ngIf, if you should remember, if you use ngIf and if the condition fails, it will remove that HTML content from the DOM. This is one of the important technical questions that you will encounter when you're going for an interview. The DOM content will be removed if ngIf condition doesn't satisfy. The HTML will not be there. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm mimicking in such a way that we are assigning the data right in the startup, but I wanted to assign this data after 10 seconds. I'm trying to mimic as if that I'm calling an API. If API is responding a bit late, what happens to our UI? That is what I'm trying to show you, right? So I'm going to mimic this and I'm going to load this data after 10 seconds. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to load this. Okay, so now I load this. For 10 seconds there is no data coming up, right? After 10 seconds the data started loading, but user will not know what is happening, right? So we can actually use some ngIf condition in the HTML, and we can actually show them that if there is nothing data available to show, do not even load that content. That is what we are saying. See, I'm putting an ngIf and saying product length should be at least greater than 0, but in this case I'm not using length because product is like currently undefined, so anything undefined is false, okay, because we haven't assigned the data, right? That's the reason. So now see, there's nothing loaded here. After 10 seconds it loads. So you saw what happened when the data was not present, right? So let's bring up some nice spinner when it is waiting for the data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy paste a piece of code. You see this only 4 lines of code that shows the spinner, okay? That's also taken from the bootstrap side. So what will happen is, if the product data is not there, you see this, the spinner started coming. So it gives a visual appearance for the user that the application is working, something else is happening, and we just need to wait for it. Okay, so now this piece of code, if I put it here, we cannot reuse it anywhere else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a separate component called spinner component, and then put that piece of code there. We can use that component wherever we wanted to show the spinner, and then later we will move this to the shared module, okay? So that it is shared across different modules. So let's go and create ng generates component spinner. The spin component has been created under the same module. Right now we just have only one ng module, okay? So we're gonna remove this, all these things. We're gonna cut this whole code, okay? Move this piece of code to the spinner component. So go to the spinner component, go to the HTML, copy, paste. Yes, we pasted, we formatted. Now how do we use this? So this is the selector, right? So app dash spinner. So let's come to this product homepage, and then use the spinner component and use this logic, right? The ngIf in the spinner. So this way the spinner component is now separated, and we can use this wherever we want. See, the spinner started appearing, and after 10 seconds, once the data is available, it will start showing the data. So I'm going to put it for 3 seconds or maybe 2 seconds, so you can see visual difference. Okay, so let's put 1.5 seconds. So I'm going to reload this. 1.5 seconds it will show, and then see, it disappeared and it started showing the website. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to develop is the shared module. Okay, so far whatever you saw, we had only one ng module, right? So we are going to create another ng module and name it as shared module. As name suggests, we are going to put the components and other things in the shared module, and shared module can be imported into the main module, the app module, so that the common things like the spinner components and other common things that can be used across various modules. That's the motto of this, right? And you also know how these feature models are developed. So this is shared module. The product feature model will be developed in the next clip. So I'm going to use a dash module. You see this, it started creating. This is because the snippet that we used. Okay, so in the starting of the video you have installed the Angular snippet, right? So based on that, I'm creating a file called sharedmodel.ts. So this is exactly an ng module. Ng module will have imports, export, declaration, provides. So in this we are importing the common module. So next thing that I'm going to create is the spinner component. Okay, so far we learned how we created the component using the CLI, right? So what if I have to create the component by myself? So I'm going to create a spinner folder that's for the spinner component. Okay, and then right click and create a file. So this file, I will name it properly, spinner.component.ts. So here I can say a dash component. So I'm going to use the snippet here. Okay, so let's create a couple of files. One is the ts file, one is the HTML file. So let's come to the HTML, the ts file. Let's come to the ts file, and by using a.component, you were able to see how I was able to create the snippet. And I'm going to give the selector and the template and the name of the component. Okay, so don't worry, we already have this component in the other module. We are going to delete that. We're going to move those code here, and I'll show you how to use the shared modules. Okay, so in this declaration we need to declare the spinner component. Okay, so the spinner component is coming here, and you also have to export the spinner component, because when you export this, only then whoever is importing will have those components to use it. Okay, so we will have to export whatever we are creating on the shared module. Okay, all right, so we need to export this component. Let me write some comments. So you can also create another component called products view. So if you see this ng generate component slash shared, so under shared folder I'm asking to create a new component view folder, the product view component. Why do we need this? I'm trying to cut and paste a piece of code which is there in the home component, right? I'm going to use that logic into this product view component so that you can reuse this component in many places. Like, you can use it in wish list, you can use it in the component. I'll show you how to reuse this. Okay, so that's the reason. So I'm gonna go and cut this piece of code which is there in the home component, complete thing, and then we will place this inside the product view component. Okay, so let me quickly do this. Cut, go to the shared module. So I'm gonna cut this piece of code, whichever there in the HTML file and the TS file, into this component. And I'm going to clean up the component whichever is there in the home component. So we're going to clean up all these things. Okay, so right now there's two spinner component. Okay, so we should actually delete the spinner component which is outside the shared folder. So this spinner is within this shared folder, so we have to clean up a few more code. So right now everything is loaded here, and if you go to this app component, okay, so these things are showing error because the spinner component is twice. Okay, so we need to delete the spinner component from here because we removed it, so we don't need this spinner component. Let's clean up this. So all the errors went. Okay, so let's take a look at the page. Is it loading? Okay, looks something is wrong. There was no data coming up. Okay, so we need to put the component here, right? So app dash product view component, because the product view component is what has the data, right? So we need to use this selector. So app product view. So let's copy the selector. Let's go to this home component and let's use this. So the expectation is whatever is there in the app. So whatever there is in the app product view, everything is going to show up. That's the expectation. And looks like I've copy pasted all these code in a wrong component. So let's cut this and paste it in the right place, which is the product view. Okay, so earlier it was there in the spinner component. That was the mistake that I did. So it happens, right? Sometimes when you copy paste, it always happens. So I'm going to clean up this quickly. So cut this from the spinner and put it into the put all the one which is has to be in the product view component. Okay, so once you have all these things ready, still we have having some errors. Okay, so the products. Okay, so we don't have products, so this is also incorrect. We should not have anything on the spinner component. So I'm gonna paste that inside this product component, product view component. Let's bring up all the import, so we can import all the proper files. So we imported it. So control period will give you option to import, so use that as a shortcut. So right now everything is good. It is still showing up some error. Okay, so let's see what is the problem. Okay, so it clearly says this product view is not a known component. That's because if you remember, we have these two components in the shared folder, right? The shared module. We never imported the shared module into our app module. So once I import the shared module inside our app module, this error started going. See, the error disappeared. So as and when you see errors, you will try to read it, and then you can see how the data looks. Okay, so right now you see this after we refactored it, we are now seeing this app product view from the shared module. We don't have anything outside it, so we're going to reuse this. Okay, so now the spinner is missing, so I'm going to copy paste the spinner code. It's basically a simple HTML, and then once that is pasted, I will refresh and show you how the spinner looks. I'm going to refresh. You see the spinner started coming, and after 1.5 seconds the data started showing up. Great. So in this small clip we were able to learn how we refactored, how we created a new shared module, how we were able to use all these things. Okay, so the next thing that we are going to do is the feature module. Okay, so we're going to create a product module that is a feature module. So that will have many components which will deal with the product view, product page, the wish list, all those components, right? Anything related to the product will come under the feature module called product feature module. So I'm going to create a new folder called product, same as how we did for the shared module. It's a product.model.ts, creating the product module with a dash module. Okay, that's a shortcut to bring up the snippet. So here I'm going to do what I'm going to do is I'm going to create couple of components. Okay, so before that, let's first import whatever modules that we want. We want common module, we want shared module. Okay, so we imported these two modules. So we imported the two modules called common modules and shared modules. Okay, we don't need this product component for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Angular CLI quickly and create a couple of components. Okay, so in order for me to do, I'm going to say under the product. So under the product, I'm saying create a component called product detail component. The next one is the product view content component. Okay, and then product view filter component, and then that should be a wish list component. Okay, so don't worry about these components. Let's first quickly create it. So I have a product view layout component, and and then the last one should be the wish list component. Okay, so we will create all these things, or when we create all these things, all the components will be automatically added to the product module. Okay, we haven't gone to the routing yet, so don't worry. So for now we have all these components ready inside the product model, the product module. Okay. So the next thing that we are going to learn is integrating the HTTP servers. We're going to use the HTTP servers and integrate with the real API and replace the static data with the real data. Okay, so that is what our next goal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder called service, and because this is just a demo app, right, the services is kept outside, but generally speaking the services are created inside the each module itself. Okay, so for the future module product, it will be there inside that itself. So let's stick to this category servers. I created a category servers file, and let's use a-servers, which brought up me a piece of code. Okay, so any class that you decorate with the injectable, then that becomes injectable servers. Okay, so you can inject that using the dependency injection. And when I say provided in root, so this means providing it in the app module. Okay, so root means the app module, but if you don't provide this in root, actually you can provide the specific servers to any of the particular component or at the feature model itself. So it's like a tree. Imagine if like a tree, right? You're providing something at the top, then all the branches down the tree will get it. So that's what the app module is. But if you're providing to a particular branch, only leaves under the branch will get it, right? So that is what it means. So where do you provide it? So you can actually provide the servers in this providers, in any of this module, or even in the component there is something called providers. You can actually provide the services here. Okay, but this is just for you to understand, but we're not going to do everything. So we will actually go back to our list and provide it at the root itself. Okay, so remember, based on where you provide, the services will be able to be injected for the callers. If the service is provided to a particular component, the other component cannot get the same services. Okay, so that is how it is. And all these services, this instance are all by default it's a singleton instance if you provide at the root level. Okay, also sometimes based on the company requirement or the restrictions, sometimes we have to provide the services only to a particular module, and only the components inside the module or a particular component will be able to use it. Okay, so again, that's all for your understanding, but in general, for our demo purpose, we will provide this in the root, which means any component or any service trying to inject this category service should be able to get the instance of the service. Okay, so now in the constructor, like how we provide this as injectable service, right, there is a class called http client. Okay, this class is injectable. So what we are doing is, anything that you provide in the constructor, so we're declaring a private variable called http, and we are saying we want http client instant. Okay, so you can get this http client instance from the Angular module, and if you see line number 2, I'm importing it from Angular/common/http. Okay, so there's a spelling mistake. You see this http, right? So that was the reason why it was not showing up. I have to correct that. So it's http. Right now it is only http client, so that's why this error is not going up. It's a typo error. Okay, so I'm correcting it. Now it should come up. Great, so there is no error now. Okay, so what do we have to do is, we have to define the URL of the application, right? So we will define a variable called API URL, and that is of type string. Okay, so we will assign some value to this API URL in the constructor itself. So you can assign like this, and if you assign some URL here, that will become a hard-coded URL, right? Hard-coded URL means the URL is not dynamically changed. Think of this: if your application is deployed in several environment, QA environment, stage environment, production environment, development environment, right? Now if you hard code like this, you cannot use it. That's where something called environment variables are coming. So if you go under the environment, right, you can define the variables. So I'm going to define first an interface. Okay, so that will have the environment name, production API URL, all these properties that you're seeing here. So all these properties are there in this environment configuration interface. We're going to use this and then define for different variables, like different environment. Okay, so don't worry about the sketch time. I have a separate video for that. I'll show you. So here, instead of this, we will import, like we will implement the environment configuration interface, which means you need to define all the properties here. Okay, so the first property that we will define is the dev. The environment is dev environment, and I'm copy pasting the rest of the code. So this has the URL. See, for dev environment, I can use the dev URL, but because we are going to get the data from the actual deployed version, I'm using this URL. Okay, this is the API URL. Okay, so what we will do is, we will copy paste the same thing for the production environment also. Okay, so I'm going to copy paste this in the production environment, and so here what you will do, you will actually take this API endpoint from the environment. See this environment.api URL. So now you don't need to do anything. Based on the configuration, the API URL is dynamically replaced here. Okay, so let's create a first method called get categories. So get categories will return observable of a categories array. So why do we know this return type? So we know for a get environment, like for a get endpoint, we know what is the return type. So that's why we put an observable of category array. Observable is nothing but subscriber publisher pattern. I've already explained this in my previous video. So I'm going to explain that a little bit later. So basically we will define a URL here, which will format the end URL here. You see this? So if I try this out, the URL that you're showing up here, right? So that is what I'm formatting here. So this is what exactly the URL is, and we need to send the array of categories. Okay, so I'm going to copy paste a piece of code, these methods, right? So these methods are generic methods. So the get array and the extract methods are all generic methods. Basically what I'm trying to do is, when you call certain get endpoint, okay, based on the type that we get, right, we don't need to cast it. I'm going to pass this the data to the extract data function, and it was going to see whether the status code is 200 or less than 300, which is acceptable code, and if not, it will throw an error. Okay, so what we have to do here, we have to say return, and then if you look at the get method, this basically uses this .http.get. Okay, so that's how you get the data. So because this is an array method, so we will use this .get array and we will cast it to categories, that's the t type, and then we'll pass in the URL. If you don't have this generic methods, how you will use it? You will use it like this: return this .http.get, pass the URL, and you can also pass the headers. But right now we haven't casted it. Okay, so that's why it's showing up error. But if you cast it properly, you can actually use this way also. So it's up to you whether you use this way or the other way, but I prefer to use the generic methods, so that's why I've copy pasted this. So now we have the get method, and we will also write another get method which will accept a particular ID and return only one category. Okay, so this time it is not array, so this is just a get. So that's the difference. And the URL, of course, we need to change the URL. Right now it's pointing to all. Instead we will use the template literal and we will pass the ID. Okay, now because we are on the services page, we will quickly create other methods which supports creating of a category, saving, basically creating of a category, updating a category, and deleting a category. So we don't use those things right away here. We are just going to create those methods, and I'll show you how this post, put, and delete works. Okay, so it's almost same, right? You will first format the URL. You will have a model for a post, okay, and this type, this is observable of any. Why we don't have any particular type here? Because it can return any types of error. It can return a validation error, it can return any other things for a successful operation. That's why for post, put, delete, prefer observable of any. Okay, so here it's all same. You use this .http.delete for deleting, .put for the update, for post is for creating a resource. Okay, so everything comes from the HTTP client. Okay, so now you know how a service is created, how different types of HTTP methods are used. Now we will copy paste exactly same. We will do a small refactoring, and that will bring up our product service. Okay, they're all same, environment is same. We just need to change it to the product variable. Okay, now we have two services, the category services, the product services. Okay, so I'm not going to waste your time by repeating the same logic again and again. They're all same, you go through it. Okay, whatever you understood in the category, they're all same in the product. It's just that I have added more methods which supports the API. So if my API has like 6-7 endpoints, I have actually added those 6-7 endpoints in our services as well. Okay, because eventually when you go to this reactive forms in our course, you'll understand why these things are required. Okay, so let's go to the home component. Okay, so let's go to the home component and provide these two dependency injections. So we are asking Angular, give me product service and category service. These two services are declared at the root level, which means if you ask for a service, it will give you the services. Now, like I said, ngOnInit is one of the lifecycle hook component, lifecycle hook for a component, right? So in this, we are triggering a API call. So how do you trigger API call? This dot category service dot get categories, that's the method, and then you have to subscribe to it. Okay, so once you subscribe to it, it will fire an event, and once the data is received, the line number 30 will start executing it. That's called the subscription, like how you do the YouTube subscription, right? If you subscribe to my channel, whenever I update a video, you get notification, right? That is what it is. So we subscribe, we subscribe to it, and once data comes, it will load the data and place it into our variables. So in our case, we are calling category services and get all product services, so that we get categories and the products. Okay, so two things we are calling. Now we have a bunch of information, we don't need the static data. Remember, we were using the static data, right? We don't need the static data anymore, but the component data, right, they're sitting in the like basically it's in the shared module. Okay, the shared module is still using that. Okay, you see this under the shared module, under the product view, we are using the static data. We're going to replace that static data by passing the actual data. So how do we do that? Let's see. We're going to remove all these things. Okay, we don't need all these things. We're going to remove all the static data. Okay, I'm going to clean up this. You might have already read this. So I'm going to comment that view and then see whether the categories are coming. Okay, so I'm going to use the same techniques, the filter symbol and the JSON symbol, and I'm going to run this application. So basically when the home page loads, right, it is supposed to call the API and get the data. You see this, we're getting an error, HTTP client provider is not done. See, this is what it is, right? So the services needs to be provided. In our case, the HTTP client, right, which is coming from HTTP client module, that has not been imported. Once you import that error went, and you see this, we are loading this data, and it is actually calling the service, and once you receive the data, it started appearing on our UI. So we saw the product data coming up, you see this 13 data, and you saw the category data coming up. Okay, so now our services works perfectly, we have the data. So now what we are going to do is, let's see how to pass this data to the component which is sitting in the shared module. Okay, and we're going to use something called input attribute. So the input is used to pass data from one component to another component. Okay, so in order to use the input, it's very simple. Okay, so if you see the product view component, right, in the shared module, so what we are going to do is, right now we are having two variables. Okay, we're going to change these two variables into an input category. So how do you do this? I need to mark these two with a attribute called @input. This input you can import it from the Angular core. Okay, so once you have this decorator for a given variable, which means actually you can pass the data for this two variables. Okay, and I'll show you how to pass these two data. Okay, so now let's copy this selector, let's go to this home component. Okay, so here once you put this, right, like you learned how the data binding works. So data binding is like you're passing data, right? So which means for this products you need to use the square bracket, and then in the right side you need to pass the data itself. Anything, the input, anything that you use as input will become an attribute of that component. So in our case, the products, the categories are two attributes, and you're passing these two data that you retrieved in the home component to this product view component. What will happen, because you will send it, you will be able to receive the data. So in order for me to differentiate, I'm just putting product list. Okay, so that you know, left side what you see products is basically the input attribute, the input variable inside the product view component. The right side product list that you see, that is the local variable that is present in the home component. Okay, and which will hold a list of products. Okay, so use square bracket for passing the data for the input, and there is some error, so let's copy paste, let's change this name, the error went. Now see, you got two data and we passed these two data, right? That's why the component started working. So let's clean up this unnecessary thing so that you will see only the valid data. So I copied, let's format it, let's open up, you see this. Now we are back again. Okay, so we removed the static file, we removed the static data, and we are now passing the data to this component and we are using it. So now think of this. Okay, because we started getting the data from the services, I'm going to remove all these things, right? The initial setup, it's going to be the date, and let's see how it looks. So we are going to retrieve all this data. Now it is still looking good, all works perfect, all great. So you know how to use the input. So the next thing that we will see is the routing. Okay, so we have already added a couple of components under the product module, right? You saw that feature model that we built, but we are going to see how the routing works now. So I'm going to create a file called app-routing.module.ts. Okay, so this routing module, this itself is a module. Okay, so what we are going to do is we will use the snippet. So we will use a snippet a dash module because this itself is a module. So ngModel. So I'm gonna clean up the default one that was created. So we don't need the components, we don't need the declarations. So what we need is we just need the import and export and the module itself. So I'm gonna create and name it as app routing module. Okay, so this is app routing module, and this itself is an ngModel. Remember this module can be imported by other modules. Okay, so we'll define a variable, a constant called routes, which is of type route. So we will define a variable called routes of type routes, and that's an array of a route. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to define one of the route. So for that, in the curly bracket, if you define path as empty and path match as full, which means when someone lands on the page, there is nothing other than the website name. Okay, in our case localhost 4200, that's it. Then we are saying redirect that to a route called home. Okay, there is no route yet, but we are defining the route called home. That's the one that we are defining on line number 6. And in this home route we are saying bring up the component called home component. Okay, so that is what we are saying. So by default, if someone lands, it will go to the home component and we will bring up the home component for the routes. Similarly, if someone comes and lands on slash products, we will say okay, go and start loading the children's of this product module. So for that we are saying load children, it's a variable, and we are saying for that we are importing a module called product module. Okay, so that is what line number 9 does. So we are actually defining and loading the module for a particular route because that has child routes, right? So under products it could be many other routes, product slash something. Okay, so that is what it is. So now in this ngModel, what we have to do is we need to import the routes that we define in line number 5. So for that you use router module dot for root. There are two things, for child and for root. For child is for the sub routes which is inside the feature module. Okay, but here this is for root, and then we are defining the routes here. Okay, this is at the top level, right? That's why we use this. And don't forget to import that into the app module. Okay, so I will summarize this app module, app routing module that we defined here, right? That is at the route at the top level, at the parent level. Okay, we haven't defined any route under the products. If someone lands on slash product, we haven't defined anything what to do with that. We will do that shortly. Okay, so now to clean up whatever was there added in the declaration, I'm gonna cut this and move this to the routing module. Okay, so that the ngModel that you have is not complicated and growing. It will be simplified. So here you define all these things and you can export that. So when you define a constant called routed components and put all these newly created components like about components, header component, home component, all these things, right? You define it here and then import this routed components into your declaration of your app module. Okay, so for clear, don't get confused. We are just refactoring it to make it simple. Okay, when you declare here, what will happen? whatever was exported and come and sit here. Okay, logically we are separating it. Okay, all right. So let's clean up all these things. Let me take a look. Everything looks good so far. Okay, so let's rename this as routing r caps, which is wrong here. So let's come here, r caps. Okay, so app routing module. Okay, there are still some errors because the import was incorrect, so we will change this as well. Now everything looks good. Okay, so naming convention has been followed. I think you're also following it. Okay, so what next? So now you come to this app component and put a router dash outlet. Okay, so think of this is a template, right? So in the router outlet, the components that you route will come and sit there. Okay, so the header component will stay there, and the center part, which is the router outlet, will come and sit here. You see this? After we started loading this app, it's automatically started loading to the home component. Okay, so now let's go to this product module, and we are going to create a same, or I would say a similar ng module, the product routing module, and we will define the routes for the products. So what happens if they go under the product? That is what we are going to define. Okay, so we created a product dash routing module.ts. Okay, here I'm going to name this as product routing module. Okay, like I said, we don't need extra things, so we have to define a route here. See, the route that you define here, it's only for the product feature module. Okay, once they land on your website name / products and then / whatever it is, that whatever it is what we are defining here. Okay, so what we are defining, the first one, if someone lands on localhost 4200 / products, which means line number 6 will execute, and we are saying bring up a component called a product view layout component. The product view layout component is kind of a parent component which will hold two components, the filter component and the content component. Okay, so that we'll be developing shortly, but don't worry about that. Okay, so that's the one. And then the second route, if someone comes to product / details / product product id is the one, it's a variable or a parameter that holds the data. Okay, if that happens, like for example /product / details / some number, which means when this route's activated, we are saying go ahead and open up the product detail component and show that in the router outlet. Okay, so that is what it means. So we have defined two routes. Okay, so the static, the common route under the products, and if someone wants to view a particular details of a product, that will be the product detail component, which is coming under /details / the number of the product. Okay, the product number. Okay, now there is another route that we define. If they come to /product / wish list, then we will load the wish list component. Okay, so there are three routes now, and I'm going to place the same thing and import everything that we did in the app routing module. And here, like I said, right, so you have these components directly added into the product module, right? So I have refactored it, brought up here as a separate component. Okay, and then you can actually import this in the declaration. We are exporting and importing it. Okay, so that this is simplified. Okay, so you don't need to overcomplicate your one piece of code, and then this is to simplify this and looks good and maintainable code. Okay, that's the reason. So I corrected all the errors. The name of the products was incorrect, so all the declaration has been moved here. All these components are here. Okay, they're all added to the the routing component. Okay, so we imported this. So let's format the code. Everything looks good so far. Okay, now what we have to do was we need to define the routes. You remember the routes? Whatever routes we define, we need to have that link added into these links, right? Okay, so for that you can use a-router link. See, router link, if you use, this is again a snippet code. Okay, if you use the snippet code, it will help you to write a piece of logic automatically. But if you have to manually write, you need to write router link equal to and then in the double quotes you need to open up the square bracket, define the route with a single quote, okay, so that okay, so when they click on home, it is /home. You can also use the snippet is that router outlet. See, everything started coming, and you can directly define products. Okay, so that's for the product routes. And for the wish list route, it is same. You can define a dash router link, and it will bring up a snippet of code, and you can actually put /product/wishlist. Okay, you can actually pass the data also, and we will see how to pass the data when you go to the product view, the component. All right, so we have loaded all these things. Router is working. Let's open up this app. Right now it is spinning, which means there's some error. Let's go to the console. See, there's some error. Okay, so basically it says it is not able to load data. Okay, all right. So I figured out. So basically we were loading data from my production app, and it turned out to be that I was using so much, and the limitation exceeded. So that's why the API is returning all this 403. Don't worry, I have now pointed to my local database. All these data started coming up. Okay, it's just that I'm pointing to my local data. See the local host. So don't worry about now. So let's continue on this. You can actually use by your own. So we started seeing this data. Right now the home is the router, and if you click on the products, okay, so some products will come here, and if you click on my list will come here. Okay, so the reason why you're not seeing anything on the product is for the products, right? We haven't defined which component, we have defined which component to load, but we haven't defined what is inside that component. Okay, so let's go to that product layout and see there is some data that is already present. So ideally I would expect this piece of code to come here, but it's not coming, and there is no error as well. Okay, this is tricky. This is what happens sometimes, right? You don't have any clue of what is happening. So everything looks good. There's no console error. This product view layout works. This whatever I'm typing should actually come if the router works properly, because when you click on the products, the router is actually working. The router link is working. It's turning to be that /products, but it's just that this is not coming. Okay, so we'll figure out. So what we have to do here is we have to build two components, right? The top one is the filter component. The bottom one is the content that displays whatever you filter it. Okay, so we'll be using an output attribute to do all these things. We already learned how we have to use the input, but we will be using the output next to demo this. So far we saw all the routings and navigating to different home page and the product page, right? So now what we are going to do is we have already built different components under the product module. So now we are going to make use of that. So if you see the product page, you have two layers. The top one is the filter, and the bottom one is the output of the filters. So the top one we have the categories listed, and you can also type something here which will instantly filter here, right? So that is what we need to build. So the top one is one component, the bottom one is one component. So we are going to make use of the component which we already built and kept it in the shared module. Okay, so let's get into that. So here if you see there is a component called view filter, the product view filter. Okay, so currently the product view filter doesn't have anything. Okay, and then we have something called the content, view content, and the layout filter. So the idea is the layout filter will have the both the components together. Okay, so the layout component is the main component under which we are going to keep two components, the top section and the bottom section. Okay, so let's work towards the top section first. So if I go to the top section, that's called product view filter. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy paste a piece of code. Okay, and then I'll show you what and how it looks. So this is the piece of code, and when I copy paste, don't worry, I'm not doing anything magic. This is a simple HTML code which will have a select box and the input. That's it, nothing else. Okay, so let's go take a look. So before that, what we need to do is we need to come to the layout and keep the app product view filter as the component here. Okay, so right now this component has only this one, and let's take a look how it looks. Okay, so if you see, once we have placed that, you can see there's one select control, and you can also see input field where you need to type something. Okay, so right now if I type some, nothing is going to happen because we haven't coded anything. Okay, and then a button which will take you to this page, and it will also show you how many wish list you have. But right now we haven't integrated any wish list, so we'll keep some number there. That's why it's just 45. Okay, so let's build one by one. So what we need to fill here, we need to fill the category here, right? So all what we need to do is, let's quickly go to the filter component, and in the filter component here we need to get the categories. Okay, so what we are going to do is, instead of getting the categories from this one, let's get the category as an input. So let's define an input, and which is of type category. Okay, so I'm going to define quickly that. So we have defined a variable called categories, and it's an of input type. You already know how input works. Okay, so we're going to pass this category from a main layout component. Okay, so we are under the layout component. Okay, so quickly I'm going to paste the same code which we already used in other places. So let's import all the thing. So what we are going to do is, we are going to have a variable called categories. We will define the service, we will inject the service. So we have a variable called categories. We are going to inject the category service, and on the ngOnload, which is ngOn in it, we're going to fetch the categories here. Okay, alright, so once we fetch these categories, we will have the category, and then right now we can pass this category there. So let's go to the layout here. You know, in order for you to pass, you need to use the input variable and pass the data. So now we have received the data in the filter component, right? So we have received the data. All what we need to do is, let's come to the select, and let's write option, and we make use of the ngFor. So here we're going to write item.name, because name is the one which will have the name of the category, and here for the value we define item.id. Okay, so we need to have the ID here. Alright, so this is done. So let's go back and see how it looks. So if I go to the product, alright, see, now all the categories has been fetched from the main component. We have passed here, and we have also added all the components here. Alright, good. So the next thing that we need to do is, we need to have a data binding for the input component. Okay, so here our input component is this input type. So what we need to do is, we need to build an ngModel. Okay, so like, you know, the square bracket, parenthesis, and here ngModel if you type, and any variable that you define here will be bind to this component and to this particular element. So we have a variable called search filter. Alright, so we have bind this. So now what we need to do is, on change of the particular content, like for example when you type, right, there is a change event happening. So there is a event called ngModelChange. So we are going to wrap a method to this ngModelChange event, and we will define a method called search changed. Okay, so by doing this, what will happen, as in when you type, it will reflect immediately of what you have typed, which is the search filter. Okay, that's the event that will tell us or give us an opportunity to do some action when user is typing. So let's have a placeholder of that method and I'll tell you what we need to do. So we have the method. Okay, great. So this is the data of type string and we will get the content as and when the user is typing. Okay, so before we proceed further, this is the idea. So from the filter component, we will first fetch all the products. Okay, we'll fetch all the products, keep it handy, and then what we are going to do is, as and when user types or changes the category, we're going to filter that product and emit that product. Okay, that's where the output comes into picture. Okay, so we're going to do that, and then once we receive the emitted content, we are going to send it back to the reusable component, which is the product view component, and product view component will start displaying whatever we are passing. That's the idea. Let's quickly get that done. So for that, what I need is, I need to have a variable called products, which will hold all the products, and then the filtered products, that's another variable which will hold the item which was filtered. Okay, so we're done with that, and then what we do, let's define two more variables called selected category and the search filter. See, the search filter is the one that we have put here, if you remember, right? So that's the variable, and then the selected category, we are trying to hold a particular category ID which was selected, and then we need to filter it. That's why we need these two variables. Okay, all right. So now the next thing that you will learn is the output. So output is the decorator, and then what we do is, we will define a variable for the output on product filter changed. That's the one, and then this is of type, and this is of type new event emitter. So event emitter is from Angular core, not the Steam, not the events. Okay, so once you do this, and then what we are going to emit is what we will put it here. If you wanted to emit a string, then it will be a string. If you want to emit a boolean, it is going to be a boolean. But in our case, what we are going to emit is the products, array of products. Okay, so once you define this, we are ready for the output, and we just need to emit at the right time. Okay, so that is what we are going to do. Okay, so now let's quickly get the products, and then let's define get products. So all this coding you already done. Okay, okay, so product service, let's bring up the product service, which we don't have right now. So under the constructor, let's bring up this. Alright, so now we have the product. So what we need to do is, first time, okay, when first time page is loaded, we will emit the whole content of the product. Okay, so for that, on product, so this dot on product dot emit, and then in the emit, see, it is already displaying what you need to emit. So here in our case, we will emit the whole products. Okay, that's the first time. Now we have to do a similar one. So for example, when the category changes, right? So once you come to this category, we're going to put a similar ngModel here. Okay, so here if you see selected category and the category changed, this is exactly what we are doing for the input here. So what we are trying to apply is, when a category is changed, we will detect that and we will emit the particular products. Okay, and then when this is done, and then this is also somebody's typing. Okay, so we need to apply two filters. So that is what we are going to do. Okay, so first thing first, so let's set up this category changed event. So I have a method called category changed. So I have a method called category changed, and which is accepting the selected category as string. So why the selected category is a string? If you look at here, right, in the select, the value was defined between a single double quotes, which means anything within the double quotes is considered as a string. Though ID is a number, literally this is considered as a string. Okay, so for that we will accept that, and then if you do a plus symbol of a variable, it will try to convert into a number. So we are saying the converted number is equal to -1. What does that mean? If the selected item in the category is this one, which is value is -1, then we don't need to do anything. We have to reset it, right? Which means we are not filtering with any category. We need to send everything. But other than -1, which means it is belongs to this, any of the category which is selected. Now, if it is reset to all categories, we will emit the whole products. If not, we will filter the products based on the category, and then that filtered product is what we will emit. That is what this category change event is doing. Okay, now search changed. Here what we need to do is we need to first see what is applied, which filter is applied. Now we will have a variable called second filter to apply. We will first see whether the selected category is -1, which means there is nothing applied, so we need to take the products. If something was done, we will take the filtered products, which is already set here. Okay, now once this is determined, and this will hold any one of these. Now on top of this, what we will do, we will apply the second filter. So what are we going to apply for the second filter? We will say this one dot filter, we will include whatever you're typing should be there in that name of the product, or it should start with or end with. Any of these condition matches, we'll have to emit it. Okay, so let's copy this. How do we emit this? We will emit this. So this one will hold the final filtered products. Okay, so let's Control A, Control K, Control F will format the code. Okay, so now we have seen how to emit it, but you wanted to see how it is working, right? So all what you need to do is you need to see how it is emitting. So this is a local variable. So what is local variable? Local variable is basically there are a couple of local variables. Okay, so let me see how to test this. Okay, so now all what you need to do is you take this output component of this output variable, okay, and then go to the layout. In the layout, if you see, the filter is what it is emitting. Okay, now we know for input you need to use the square bracket, but for an output it's an event emitter, so you need to use parenthesis and then followed by the method. So let's give it a name as emitted products. Okay, so emitted products is the method which will be called. So let's go write that method quickly, which will be an array of product, right? That is what is emitted. Okay, so we will say products. Okay, so our emitted product is the product, so we will add this model. Okay, so now once we receive this, we will assign this to our products. So we don't have any variable called products, so let's define the products of type product array. Okay, so all what we are going to do is we are going to assign it. Okay, so once this is emitted, this is assigned. So we have category, we have products, and everything looks good. Okay, so now if you see, I can give a demo like this. Okay, so we have emitted this, we have accepted it from the filter, everything looks good. Let's put this one and see how it works. So I saved it. Okay, there's some error. Let's take a look. Okay, so we have this error, and that's because under the product module we have to import a module called form module. So once you import the form module, you can see it's getting built and there is no error. All good. So let's clean up all these things which is not required. Okay, so all good, cleaned. Let's take a look at the demo. So once we go to home, you see this right now there is no product here. Okay, so all the products are listed here. See, that's a big. Okay, so if you touch this, let's say men's shirt, our filtered already tried to filter it, but there is nothing here, so we didn't get anything. But once you filter to baby soap, you see there are few items coming up, not all the items, right? It's filtered. Now let's apply the second filter. So it's gonna check for this name, right? So let's type baby. See, this is only 2 items are there, so all the items have baby. So let's do Avino. Okay, Avino. Okay, everything is there. So let's type something random. See, now there is no such item, so it's going away. Okay, so if I type wash, how many items are there? I think all the item has a wash. Okay, yeah, it's there. Let's do this. See, it's filtering. Alright, so let's do this. So now it's working. All what we need to do is we need to pass this category and this product, filter product, into our reusable component. So where is our reusable component? If you see under the chat, where is chat? Product. Okay, here. So this component, right? This component has 2 input, products and categories. Once you pass this, it will take care of displaying everything. So now let's take that. Let's go to product. Let's go to the layout. And all what you need to do is we will apply this component and we need to use the categories. So we have something called categories and then products. Okay, so why do we have products here? Here product is the one which is emitted from the previous component. Okay, so let's filter this. Let's go back and take a look at the demo. Okay, all right, so you see all the products are listed now. Okay, as and when you start filtering, only those are applied here. So that's how you will use input and output. Input is to pass to a component. Output is the child component is trying to tell something to the parent component that, hey, some data changed. That's what this is doing, right? In our case, we have a layout component. These two are child components. This child component, so let's summarize this, right? We have layout component. From layout component, we passed the categories to both the components. Good. Now we fetched all the products from this top component, and then based on the filter that you apply, the filtered content was emitted. That is received by the parent component and passed into this input component. This component as an input, and it started displaying the component. And if you see, this component is making use of more than one places. This is exactly same. That's how Angular is powerful. You can make use of your piece of code so many times according to your logic, according to your need. Okay, good. So we saw input, output, we saw routing, we saw a lot of things, right? Now what we need to do, if someone is clicking this add to wish list, we need to invoke a particular method. So we need to invoke a method and put it here to save the content. And whenever someone is coming to this page, right now nothing is there, but we will build a UI to fetch. So we will go here, we will fetch everything from here and display it there. That's what we are going to do next. Okay, so the next thing is building a wish list. Okay, so we have seen how to create services and all those things. It is exactly same. So we know how to create services and all those things, so it's exactly same. So let's not waste time. Let's go to the servers, right click and create a file called wishlist.service. Okay, so now we're going to copy paste a piece of code which is exactly same as what you saw in the product and the category. Okay, there is no change. So now what we do, we need to bring up the other model called wishlist model. So let's go to quickly model and bring up that as well. Okay, so let's go to model, create a file, wishlist.ts, and let's copy this, let's paste this. See, this model that you're seeing here, that is exactly what is there in this model. Okay, so if you see the post or a get, it has this model. You see this id, product id, and owner AD object id. Okay, all right, so that's what I have given here. No, nothing else. It's all exactly same. Okay, so if you see the buttons, right, the view button and as well as the add wishlist button, they belong to a component called view component, and view component is a shared one. Okay, the buttons are here actually. You saw that, right? These two buttons are here. So we need to write a piece of code here to do that work. So what we are going to do is we are going to have a variable called wishlist count. Okay, initially we will set the count as 0, and then we will have an output variable. Okay, output variable as wish list count changed. You remember how we saw the output works? So what we're going to do is, as and when someone is clicking the wish list, we know count has been changed. So whenever the count is changed, we will emit an event, and that number is what we will display in the top filter component, where you see that numbers 45 plus, we'll put a real number there. Okay, so that is what we're going to do. Okay, let's bring up this namespace. Okay, good. So what we do is to make this little beautiful. Okay, so let's install a package, npm install ngx toaster. Okay, so toaster is a package which will nicely show up some nice message in the top or bottom based on how you configure, but that will give us a good interaction to the user that something has happened, something has changed, some information which will disappear in some time. Okay, so for that, let's quickly install that, and while that is getting installed, what we will do is we will quickly go and grab the other work. Okay, so it's installed. So what we need to do is let's quickly go to the Angular packages, and we're gonna import a particular CSS from the toaster, so that it will come when it builds. Okay, so let's go to Angular, and if you go under the script styles, so let's place this style. Okay, so that's the style that we need. Okay, so we have pasted. Now let's go to our product view component, and here's the thing. So we're gonna do a dependency injection for two services. One is the toaster service, another one is the wishlist service. Okay, so both has been used as a dependency injection, and what we need to do is, when someone is hitting on add, okay, we need to call a method, and then that method should give us an opportunity to save the item that a user has saved. That is what we're going to do next. Okay, so let's simplify this. Okay, so I'm going to add a method. So let me show you that method. So the method name is add wishlist. Okay, so this method will be called when you hit on the button called add wishlist. Okay, so we'll integrate that. So that will pass in the product from the UI. So how do we pass? So let's take this add wishlist, and let's go here, and you see this add item. Okay, so this is what the place where we need to add. Okay, so we will add on click. So that's the wish list, and then we will pass in the item, which is the product. Okay, so once we receive the product, we will format the model, which is the wishlist item model. Okay, so where is this model is coming? If you go to this post, you see this is the model, and this is the model that we have it in our model itself here. Okay, so for good. All right, So once you have this model, the product ID we know, so we're going to pass that model to this create wishlist one, which will invoke this method, this API method, and the API will process and it will come back. So when it comes back, it will tell us, okay, if you're first time adding it, good, which will come to the else statement. But if we get a 400 status code bad request, which means the API is telling us, hey, this product was already added. We're trying to add the wish list twice. So that's what it says. And if we get that kind of a statement, we will display a message in the toaster nicely that this product and then the name has been added successfully already. That is what it says. Okay. And we're going to see that in action. Okay. So what else is pending? So this is pending view details. Okay. So when someone is clicking on view details, we have to put them back to the view page. Okay. Which is a particular edit of a particular item page. Okay. That is what we have to do. Okay. So how do we do that? So if you come here, okay, there's something called routing. So you can use a router link which we already saw, and then this is the path. So path is product slash detail, and then you need to pass the product ID, which is item.id. Okay, so once you pass all these things, it should be good. And then let's summarize this. Okay, so we have set up both the things. Now let's take a look at the demo. So there is no error. Let's go check this. Okay, there are a bunch of errors. So what are those errors? Can't bind it to the router link. Okay. So if it is showing such thing, which means there is some module missing. So if you go to the shared module under the import, okay, we just have the common module. So let's bring up the form module, which is not really required, but let's put in form module. And then the module that is required for this error to go away is the router module. So router module, because router link belongs to router module. Okay, so let's bring up that, and then let's wait for this to rebuild. Okay, so let's save this. Let's try to rebuild. Okay, so now it's saying toaster is not there. Alright, so toaster module is also something that we need to import it. So we can import the toaster at the parent level, at the root level. So let's go to app module. Okay, and in the app module here, if you come, so we're gonna build. Okay, so let's bring up all these things. Okay, so we have imported the toaster module. Okay, we still get some error. Let's take a look. What do we have it? Toaster container. Alright, so there were some issues in the ng toaster. I fixed it, and let's take a look at the demo. So once I click on this add wish list, okay, all set. Now let's take a look at the demo. So now I'm trying to add a particular item as my wish list. So if I click on it, you see this added product Philips 1 by 1, all these things. If you try to add this, API is now returning a 400. Okay, you can check this in the network tab. So if I click this, you see this, the network is returning the 400. I can go to the network tab, and I can see what's happening. See, I'm getting a 400 response, but if I try to add a different one, I'm getting a 200 response. But if I try again, that 400, right? So that's how the API will do. Now we have a couple of items added in the wish list, right? And we wanted to show this here nicely. So let's build this next. So before we build that, I forgot to tell you, we haven't seen this demo. So once you click on this view edit, like view details, now we have navigated to this page. Okay, but we haven't set up the UI here. But don't worry, let's finish up this my wish list page, and then let's quickly come and build the view of the the product detail page. Okay, so let me walk you through what I have done. So I've come to this wish list component, and if you go to the component, what we are doing here is we are having a list of wish list item. So list of wish list item is nothing but if I go there, right? So this is the wish list item that we saw in the API, and we are trying to fetch the items from the wish list. So this one, right? This is the list of wish list item. Okay, so now, and then we will have a list of products and then the filtered product wish list. Okay, so we have these three variables, and regularly we have the total service, the product service, and the wish list service injected in the constructor. And let's get all the products. So what we are going to do here, we have these three variables. Okay, so think of this. The wish list is going to give us only the product ID. We don't know the product name, we don't know product details, none of those we have, right? The product image, none of those we have. So all what we are going to do is, this is just a demo, so we're going to retrieve the complete product. Okay, and then we're also going to retrieve the complete wish list items. So if you see on init, first we will return all the products, and when the product is returned, we will call another method called get wish list. Get wish list will get all the items of the wish list. Once we receive the item, we are going to call another method called populate wish list item. So basically this logic, what it is doing is, it is going through each one item, and based on the product ID that we find, right, we are going to push the product itself into the filtered product. Okay, so the filtered product will eventually have the list of product which is matching the wish list item. That is what we are trying to do. Okay, and why do we need this? Just to show the UI with some product name and description. That's why there is no fancy items. Okay, and then if someone is trying to delete it, we will invoke a delete method and delete the wish list item. Okay, and for this, a simple UI with a table, and we will just go through the filtered product. Okay, rest and all is all same. There's no new things that I've done here to show you. Everything is same. Okay, so on click of this delete, we will invoke a delete and then delete a particular item. Now let's take a look at how it looks. Okay, so let's navigate to the my list, and you see this, these three items I added. Okay, let's go back to the product. Let's add fourth item. Let's add some more items. Okay, all these items are added, and if I go to the wish list, you see this, whatever item I added is now coming here. They're all coming from the API. And if I try to delete this, right, all the items one by one, it's getting deleted. Only three items are there. Okay, so that is what the simple UI is doing. Okay, so we know the home page, we have done the products, we have done the my list, and if you see under the home page, if you come down, there is another section, right, where it shows my list item, so we can build that as well. And then the rest of the item that we have to finish is the product detail page. So when you click on the details, we should build this. Okay, so let's take a look at that as well. Alright, so what we have done now is, I've come to this home component. Okay, so we have this top one, right? So we need to now fetch this details and show the wish list item. Like you might have guessed how I do this. Simple. From the home component, we call the get wish list API, get all the items and map to the product, like how we do similar to this component, right? Or yeah, so however we do this component, we do the same logic here and we display this content. Okay, so let's see, let's take a look at this, and then I'm gonna give you some work, okay, for your practice work. So you see this, I'm using the product view component, and in this we know we need to pass the products as well as the category, right? So we're making use of this, reusing this in more than two places now. So how do I pass this component here, this component in this one, right? So this one we already have it. So wish list product is what I need. So if you see I'm basically fetching the wishlist content and populating the product, okay, and then assigning it to these two variables. That's it. And then I pass in that into these two, and everything will then work magically. Okay, now let's say the display content of this wish list is different than what you're seeing here. Then it is very simple. You can use this component directly here, right? You can make use of that component directly here. If you do that, what will happen? Everything will start working. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. So if I come to this wishlist component, okay, if I take this, I come to this home component, okay, so if I put this, what will happen? Automatically this wishlist component will be displayed, but right now it is showing error because this wishlist component is part of the product module, but we are putting this inside the home component, which is the app module. Okay, both modules are different, that's why it's showing you error. But you can actually do that if the look and feel is same, but in our case the look and feel is not same, so we are going with a simple copy paste of the existing code. But all these things are just for the demo purpose. In the real world, more refactoring and more things will do so that you don't repeat the code. Okay, all right, and you can also practice by yourself with a different logic. So now we built home, we built product, we have built all these things, right? All these things are working, and we have built the my list. The one thing that we haven't done is the product wish list, this item, the 45 plus, right? It should come with some numbers. Okay, let's finish that as well. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I did this, but I'm going to give you an idea how you can do it, okay, in a different way. So what I've done is, on this page, right, on this filter page, I'm going to show you the code. Okay, so if you see the view filter page, basically I'm calling the method, API method, to retrieve how many items has been added in the wish list. Okay, and by doing so, what will happen when I go to this page from, let's say, from home to the product, it will display how many items has been added here. Okay, see, now I'm adding a couple of things. So if I go back and come here, it is updating here. See, there is a problem with what I've done, because this call will be triggered only once. Okay, if I add now, like if I add a new item now, this number is not updated. There are two things you can do. One thing is, whenever this is added, you emit another event. Okay, so take this as a sample programming that you need to do by yourself. Okay, so whatever I'm doing now, let's not do it, but instead what you can do is to have this instantly updated, go to this component, we have an output variable already, define another output variable and emit a true or false, like emit true whenever the item has been added successfully, and then this will come to the layout component. Okay, hold that number into the layout component and pass that final number to this component as input, and assign that input variable to this one. Okay, so how do I do that? So here there's a variable which tells this 45, the wishlist count. If this wishlist count, which is currently set here, okay, if you make this as input and pass from the layout component, then whenever you click this add and it becomes a success, this number can be increased automatically and instantly. Okay, so take that as a task and see if you can do that and raise a PR. I will merge it, I'll approve and merge it if whoever is doing this first. Alright, great. So one task has been added for you guys. You can do that as a practice lab. Okay, so we have done all these things. The next thing that is pending is the last one, which is the detail of the product. Okay, so this piece, right? So this piece also we can finish it quickly. So the one of the important section that we will build up now is the product detail component section. Okay, so when someone lands on the particular product, we're going to show the details of those product nicely. Okay, so let's go one by one, step by step. You will understand how I'm creating this. So what we need is the product ID, right? So product ID is the unique number that tells us which product a user has landed on. Okay, and then we need to store the details of the product. So we will have a variable called product, and then we're going to inject two services, category services and the product services, because we will end up showing the category details, the product details, the images, and so on, right? So that's why we need those two services. And the ng on init, so on ng on init, we need to retrieve the product ID from the route. So how do we retrieve that? We need to inject another service called activated route. Okay, so activated route is the service from Angular. Okay, so this will help us providing the snapshot of the product ID that is available in the route, meaning which is available in the URL. Okay, so we're going to use that to fetch the route details. Okay, so first thing first, what we have to do, we have to come to this ng on init, and what we have to do is we have to retrieve the product ID. So the first method that I'm going to do is to use the route, which is the activated route. So route.snapshot.parammaps.get, and inside this get you need to pass the exact variable name that you used to define in the route, which is product ID in our case. I'll show you shortly. So product ID, if you go to the product routing model, here you see this is the one which is defined. So the variable name has to match. Okay, if the variable name doesn't match, you will not be able to retrieve the data. So this one, right, this line number 24 will give you the product ID, but it's just a snapshot, meaning you'll understand later that when we change the route, it will not give us the latest details, but don't worry, we'll fix it. So we are going to convert this the data that we retrieved into a number by using number and then pass in this one. So now this is converted to number. You can also use plus symbol, that is also from TypeScript, that it will convert a string to a number if it is possible. Okay, so now we will define a method called get product details. So the get product details is basically, once we retrieve the product ID, we will invoke an API call, pass in this product ID, receive the product information. So this method is already defined in the product service. If you remember, when we defined category and product services, we did all these methods. So once you invoke this method, get product method, and subscribe to the data, okay, the data that comes in is the product. So we will assign this data to the product variable, which is in the local component. Okay, line number 14. So we are assigning it. Okay, so once we assign it, we have the product, which means now you can show some information on the UI, right? It has name, it has a description, it has some price, category, and couple of things. Okay, so UI, how do we do this UI in a nice way? Okay, so I'm going to divide this UI into 3 sections. If you see the section, the first section will show the image, the middle section will show the details of the product, and the third one will show the related product. Okay, so let me show you. So this is what. So for this, I have defined the default some basic the basic template. Okay, so let's go inside. I'll show you how it looks. So if I click on any of the product, so let's go to the details. You see this, when say land on this 1020, that's the product ID. Okay, so I'll show you how it looks in my other machine. So this is how, right? So there are 3 sections. The first section will show the images. Once you click on a particular image, it will enlarge. The second, the image, the center one. The center one will show you the title, the price, the description, and all those things. And the third one is the related images. So this is how I have split it. So with the split, the basic HTML I have put it. Okay, and then now I'll show you one by one how I will come up with this beautiful website. Okay, so product has some data and we can build on top of what we have now. Okay, so the first one, right, product name goes here, which means the title of the product. So we already have the product, so product dot name. Okay, this will give us the title of the product. Okay, so let's load this and see whether that's coming. You see this, the title came in. Okay, the title started appearing. So like this we will build one by one. The next thing is the price. So we have price, we have categories, and so let's go one by one. So price, how do you access price? So we'll define double curly brace product dot price. Now you can use inbuilt pipes. Okay, and to use inbuilt pipes, so right now if I do, the numbers is showing up. So to use the inbuilt pipes, okay, you can use pipe symbol, and then the pipe symbol, so in order to use the inbuilt pipe, you'll use the pipe symbol and then say currency and name the currency as USD. So now it will start showing up. So now it will start showing up the dollar symbol automatically. Okay, the next thing is to get the category name. Okay, so we have a method get category. We will pass in the category ID, similar to how we did in the previous component. Okay, so we're gonna add that we're gonna add that get category method, pass in the ID, and then fetch the category name from this category list. So we have the category list, right? So from there we can figure out which ID it is, and then we will pass in the name of the category. If we don't find it, we will be passing the empty string. This is exactly how we did in the previous component. Okay, so right now this product view doesn't have the categories, so I'm defining the categories, and then what we are going to do is we are going to call this get category methods to retrieve the category name. But we also have a get categories methods which will actually call the API and fetches the categories. Okay, so we just need to put that in the ng on init, similar to what we did for the get product details. Okay, so that way we will be started seeing this category name. You see this category name started coming up. So about this item, see, about this item is basically the description. So if you see the product description, it has kind of a paragraph with mini period in it, right? So each statement completes with a period. So each statement completes with a period. So if I just put product or description, it is going to give us all the complete description of this, right? I don't want to do this. So instead what I've thought is, innovatively, I will use this period, which is the fully stop as one of the sentence, and we will split it. So again I'll repeat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the description, okay, and I'm going to declare a variable called about this item, which is of string array. Okay, so we're going to split this description into array of strings. And what is the separator of this? Separator will be the full stop, the period. Okay, so once we split the description with the period, what will happen? Based on number of sentence with the period, it will become number of statements as an array. So that way we will be able to show that description in a line by line manner nicely on the UI. That is what I was doing. Okay, so here what I'm doing, and after we get the product data, so I'm saying data.description.trim, we're gonna remove all the empty spaces in both the sides, and then split with dot. Now this will get an array of strings. So here what will happen is about this item is array of string, right? So we got we will be able to retrieve all the data. So now what we will do, we will use the li, the the ul element, and then ordered list. OL is ordered list, so we will use just the list element li. Okay, so here what we will do, we will use the directive ngFor, and then we'll loop through each item of this about this item. See, about this item is a string of description, right? This description has been split. So once you do this, you see started appearing, the description started appearing point by point. So easy, right? So once you have data, you can play around with it. So now we were able to bring up the middle of the section of this product details. Okay, so that will be nice. All right, so let's go to this different products, and I'm able to see the description split into each point. So this is working. Now what else we have to do? So we need to bring up the side sections, right, the left side and right side. So here if you see, if I do a JSON print of the product, you will see product images. Product images will have a list of images for a given product. Okay, so hold on, there's an error, so let me do it from first. So I'm gonna print this product in a JSON format. Okay, so there is only one pipe symbol will come. Right now it is two pipe symbols, so let's remove this. Okay, so basically, right, so if you see this, it has a product image. Product image is the array of product images. You see this only product image I'm trying to print. Now I can see three images. So basically those three images comes in this left side, and when you click on each images, it's gonna enlarge the image. That is our next goal. Okay, so let's go to this HTML, and in the HTML, if you see, there's already a placeholder. So I'm going to loop through this product images, and I'm going to place a piece of code which we already saw in the previous component. So the image which will have source, and that will have the base64 data encoded. So you see this, these three images started appearing. It's just that looks ugly. So if we can put some CSS here, which will align the images nicely. You see this images started aligning it. Okay, this is what we want, right? Okay, so once you click that, what should happen? To the right side, the big image should shown. See, show selected image when clicked. So that is the next action that we have to do. So let's come here and do a event binding. On click of this image, we will call a method called set selected image and pass in the image itself. Okay, so I'm gonna create that function here, and which will be the product image as an input, and then we will have a local variable called selected product, and we will assign this image. That's it. So right now it doesn't have. Let me go and create it quickly. Selected product, and which is of type product image. Okay, great. So all good. So the selected product is selected photo, right? Selected photo is nothing but an image. So now this image holds this data, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show that image here. Okay, if ngIf, I'm going to use the directory ngIf, and if the selected product has some data, I will show this image. The only difference between the previous image and this image is the width of the image is bigger. The bottom one has a smaller image. When you click, actually the right side image is 28 rm. So that's how, right? So we are doing all these things by ourselves. This is all of innovative things. So however you think UI looks good, you can actually mimic that UI. Okay, so now when you load this page, I want the first image to be selected by default. So that is what I'm doing here on the product retrieval. I'm assigning the first images here. So that's why you don't need to click by any images. By default, the first image is selected. Okay, so let's remove all this JSON content. So now you see the left side, the middle side came. Now the right side content is left. So right side content, basically the idea behind this right side content is when you open up a product. So when you open up a product, the product has a category. Okay, so the idea is to show the similar products, which means I'm going to retrieve the product and filter the product whose category belongs to the same category of the current product. If my current product category is food, I'll try to filter all the products which has the same category called food. So that's how person who's interested on a particular product will still try to look for the similar product, right? That's how the Amazon shows, right? Amazon's try to show you a similar product so that it is easy for them to sell the products, right? You don't need to browse them. If they start showing up many products as a suggestion, you'll be able to pick up those things. So that's the idea. Okay, so for that, what do we need to do? We're gonna do those works now. Okay, so let's first build the product list. So I'm going to create a method called get products, which will pull up all the products. See, this ideally in a real time they will not do, because you cannot pull millions of product here, right? This is just a demo app. I'm just trying to show you different ideas how you can do. Okay, so do not do these things in a real time unless your products list is very small. This is fine, but not on a big project, right? So we're going to pull up all the product information, and then we're going to filter based on this category. So if you see, I filtered this with this category, the products which are similar to that category is going to show. So in this case, this one is the baby thing, right? Baby soap is the category. So baby soap category has a couple of products, so that's why it started filtering those products. Now we know we have the data filtered products, so we will loop through this with the ngFor and start showing the products, the filtered products into this section. Okay, so we're looping through that filtered product. So the images that whatever we did in the top, in the right side, right? No, the left side section, that is all similar to this. Okay, so we're gonna show those things here. So let's quickly do this. Here we're gonna take only the first image of each product. Okay, see, when you filtered, each product will have more images. That's how the current API is doing. Okay, maybe when you develop APIs, you may not be sending all the things, but with what I have, I'm trying to explain you what I'm doing. So I'm going to show only one product image. If you really wanted to learn more, I think you should try with carousel. There itself, if you put a carousel, it can show multiple images. Okay, refer my previous video of this Angular course where I have used the carousel. You can also use that here. So you have many reference to do these things. Okay, now what else we want? So under this right side section, right, I need to have a router link, the link. When you click on a particular product, right, I wanted to bring up that product information. So here I'm actually processing the router link with the route as well as the product ID, so that the URL will change with the new product number that you're doing it. Okay, so that is what this anchor link is doing, line number 56 and 57. Okay, so let's see how things works. Okay, so this looks good, right? So let me compare the current page with the developed page. Okay, so the buttons are missing. Okay, so there should be a button. When you click on this, it should take you to that product page, and it should display the data. So for that, let's quickly put the button, and the routing is all same. I just have a click method called filter similar items. Okay, so let's clean up all these unnecessary things, the pre tag and all. Now if you see, filter similar items is the method which I have. See, now you can see the button started appearing. Okay, so I'm going to click this button, and please watch on the URL there in the top. So I'm clicking button, there is nothing happening. See, right now it says the route is incorrect. Oh, that's because product S was missing. So let's reload, and then please take a closer look. I'm clicking on this button, and you can see the route, it is changing from 101514, but the product was not changing, right? See, the route is changing. I'm going to click again. See, it changed to 1013, but nothing happened. Why? That's where the step one that we discussed has to be modified. If you see here, like I said in the starting of the coding, right, this one will give you only the snapshot of the first product ID. It won't give you if the product ID is changing. So what do we do that? So what do we do for that? So we have to use a subscribe method for the param maps, and then we will have to wait for the data. So when you subscribe to this param maps, and then whenever the data changes, this event will trigger. This is again a subscription model. Okay, so whenever you click, whenever the route data changes, this will get triggered because you have subscribed to that, right, the route change. So once that happens, then we will invoke the get product details, which will eventually pull up the new information. The pages will be reloaded, right? So we are on the same route, the same page, and the route is changing. You see this? Now it started appearing. And whenever this happens, okay, the right side filtering the images based on the similar category also will change. Okay, you see this? Everything is happening. All good. Let me go and click on the different product. Now you see this? All this toy related images are coming. The products are coming. And that's how you click, and everything started looking nicely. See, you have now nicely built the product detail page. Okay, all right, so let's quickly verify what we did. So what you have to do was, if you see in the center of the page, right, there were two buttons, the add wish list and add to cart. Add to cart feature is not there, but add wish list is the button that is left unattended here. I have intentionally keeping this for your kind of a workbook. So what you do when someone clicks on that button, think what you should do based on what you studied so far, right? You can actually trigger an event from here, and then you can actually call and update the wish list item. So here itself you can do. when your button is clicked, you can actually trigger that adding wishlist API call and send the data. So that is one of the other tasks that I'm giving. You can actually do that. Let's quickly navigate to all the pages. Everything looks good. So we have learned so many things in this module. I hope you enjoyed this video, and because this video is getting lengthier and lengthier, I've decided to keep this managed product in a separate video as a part 2, which will cover the complete reactive forms for managing the products, editing the products, deleting the products, all those things that you saw in the starting of the app demo, right? So I'm going to do that with a separate one. So hang tight. I will publish that shortly after this video, and all the codes will be available in the GitHub. I will give the complete description of which API is used, what is the branches that you need to take, all those things. I will put it in the README as well as in the description. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section. If you like, give me a thumbs up, share this video to your friends if it is useful, and ask me any questions if you have. Thank you. Thanks for watching. If you like my video, don't forget to subscribe my channel, like it, share it, comment it, and never forget to click on the bell icon.